Millionaire CEO rescued a limping girl in a storm at dawn. A man was at his door. Before we dive into this powerful story of courage and unexpected family bonds, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Get ready for a journey that will touch your heart and remind you that sometimes the greatest heroes emerge from the most ordinary moments. Enjoy the story. The rain hammered against Alexander Hayes' office window like bullets from heaven, each drop carrying the fury of Seattle's worst storm in decades. Lightning split the darkened sky, illuminating the city below in brief, ghostly snaps. Alexander stood at the 52nd floor, watching the chaos unfold beneath him. When something far below caught his attention, a small figure moved erratically through the empty streets, stumbling with each step. At first, he dismissed it as his imagination playing tricks in the storm's confusion. But there it was, again a child, alone in this tempest that had sent every sensible soul running for shelter. Without hesitation, Alexander grabbed his coat and rushed to the elevator. His heart pounded as he descended, each floor feeling like an eternity. What kind of parent lets their child wander in weather like this? The lobby doors burst open as Alexander emerged into the stinging rain. The wind nearly knocked him backward, but he pressed forward, following the direction he'd seen from above. 3 blocks down, near the old cathedral, he found her. A little girl, no more than 9 years old, sat huddled against a brick wall. Her clothes were soaked through, her dark hair plastered to a pale face. But what stopped Alexander cold was the way she favored her left leg, drawing it close to her body as she rocked back and forth. "Hey there, sweetheart," Alexander called gently, approaching slowly so as not to frighten her. "Are you hurt?" The child looked up with eyes that held too much knowledge for someone so young. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper above. "The storm. My leg. It hurts so much, but I can't go back. I can't." Alexander knelt beside her, his expensive suit forgotten in the growing puddles. "Go back where, honey? Where are your parents?" "No parents," she said, shaking her head fiercely. "Just the place where they do the treatments. I won't go back there. I won't let them hurt me anymore." Something in her voice, a terror so deep it seemed to echo from her very soul, made Alexander's decision for him. "What's your name?" "Madison," she whispered. "Madison Cooper." "Well, Madison Cooper, I'm Alexander, and I'm going to help you. But first, we need to get you somewhere warm and dry. Will you trust me?" Madison studied his face for a long moment, as if weighing the risks of trusting another adult. Finally, she nodded, as Alexander gently lifted her into his arms, careful of her injured leg. She whispered something that would haunt him for days to come. "They said no one would believe me. They said no one would care about kids like us." Alexander held her closer as they walked toward his car, rain washing away his tears. He didn't know it yet, but in that moment, his entire world had just shifted forever. Alexander's penthouse apartment had never felt more like a sanctuary. As he carried Madison through the doorway, her small body trembled against his chest, not just from the cold, but from something deeper. Fear had settled into her bones like winter frost. "Let's get you into some dry clothes," Alexander said, softly, setting her gently on his leather sofa. "I have some old sweats that might work." Madison's eyes darted around the luxurious space, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows and expensive artwork. "Are you rich?" she asked bluntly. "I suppose I am," Alexander admitted, wrapping a cashmere throw around her shoulders. "Does that scare you?" "Rich people don't usually help kids like me," Madison said, pulling the blanket tighter. "They just write checks and look the other way." Her words stung with their unexpected wisdom. Alexander knelt before her, studying the pale, drawn face that looked far too serious for a night. "Madison, that leg needs medical attention. I know a good doctor." "No." The word exploded from her with such force that Alexander stepped back. "No doctors. They're all the same. They all work together. Sweetheart, you're hurt. If we don't, you don't understand." Madison's voice cracked as tears began flowing. "At St. Catherine's *, they said the treatments would help us. They said the medicine would make us stronger. But kids got sicker. Some of them, they never got better." Alexander felt ice forming in his stomach. "What kind of treatments, Madison?" She looked away, her small hands gripping the blanket. "Shots, pills, things that made us sleepy, then made us sick. Dr. Blackwood said we were lucky that we were helping other children by testing new medicines." The name hit Alexander like a physical blow. Dr. Richard Blackwood, he'd heard that name before. in board meetings, in funding reports. His company had donated money for pediatric research. Madison, Alexander said carefully, I promise you, I won't let anyone hurt you. But that leg, can you tell me what happened? For the first time, Madison looked directly into his eyes. I jumped from a second-story window to get away. I couldn't walk for 3 days, but I kept hiding. I knew if they found me, they'd take me back for more treatments. Alexander's hands clenched into fists. 3 days. This child had been suffering alone for 3 days because she was more afraid of the people who were supposed to help her than of being homeless in a storm. Here's what we're going to do, Alexander said, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. My friend Dr. Sarah Mitchell runs a private clinic. She doesn't work with any institutions. Would you let her look at your leg if I promised to stay with you the entire time? Madison studied his face for a long moment. Outside, lightning still painted the windows white, but the thunder was growing distant. Will you really stay? She whispered. I'll stay, Alexander promised. And Madison, those people at St. Catherinesdale never hurt you again. That's a promise too. As Madison finally nodded her agreement, Alexander realized he'd just made a vow that would change both their lives forever. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's gentle hands moved expertly over Madison's injured leg, while Alexander held the child's trembling fingers. The private clinic's warm lighting felt worlds away from the sterile horror Madison had described at St. Catherine's. The good news, Dr. Mitchell said softly, is that nothing's broken. But Madison, honey, this injury is weeks old. You've been walking on damaged ligaments this whole time. Madison's grip tightened on Alexander's hand. Will I need surgery? No surgery, Dr. Mitchell assured her. But you'll need physical therapy, proper rest, and time to heal. The real concern. She paused, exchanging a meaningful look with Alexander. Madison, can you tell me about any medicines you were given at the orphanage? The question hung in the air like smoke. Madison's face went pale, and for a moment Alexander thought she might flee again. They gave us shots every Tuesday, she whispered finally. Blue liquid in glass bottles. Dr. Blackwood said it would help our immune systems. But kids started getting weird symptoms, headaches, rashes. Some couldn't keep food down. Dr. Mitchell's jaw tightened. How many children received these injections? All of us. Maybe 30 kids. Madison's voice grew smaller. The ones who got really sick were moved to a different wing. We weren't allowed to visit them. Alexander felt his blood turn to ice. His pharmaceutical company had funded research at St. Catherine's for 3 years. Had his money been paying for this nightmare? Over the following week, Alexander's life transformed completely. His corporate schedule, once filled with board meetings and merger discussions, now revolved around Madison's needs. He learned to make grilled cheese sandwiches the way she liked them, crispy outside, gooey inside. He discovered that she was brilliant at math, but flinched whenever raised voices came from the television. Tell me more about the other kids, Alexander said one evening, as they worked on a jigsaw puzzle together. Madison carefully placed a corner piece. There was Tommy, he was 7, always hungry because his stomach hurt from the medicine. And Sarah, she was my roommate. One day she started having seizures, and they moved her upstairs. I never saw her again. Alexander's hands stilled over the puzzle pieces. Madison, do you remember the names of the companies that visited the orphanage? Any logos or signs? Hayes Pharmaceuticals, Madison said, without hesitation. I remember, because it was on the folders Dr. Blackwood carried. He always seemed happy when those people came. The puzzle piece slipped from Alexander's fingers. His own company, his own money. He'd been funding this horror while sitting in his ivory tower, trusting others to handle the details of his charitable giving. Mr. Alex, Madison's voice was small. Did I say something wrong? You look upset. Alexander forced his face into a calm expression, but inside, a war was raging. No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. You've been very brave to tell me these things. That night, after Madison fell asleep on his couch, she still refused to sleep in a bedroom with the door closed. Alexander sat in his study, staring at 3 years of donation records, millions of dollars, pediatric research, innovative treatments for underprivileged children. All of it lies. All of it covering up something monstrous. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Hayes, we need to discuss the child you're harboring. Some situations are more complicated than they appear. Dr. R. Blackwood. Alexander's blood ran cold. They knew where Madison was. 3 weeks had passed since the storm. and Madison's laughter now echoed through Alexander's penthouse, a sound he'd never realized his home was missing. She sat cross-legged on the Persian rug, sketching in a notebook he'd bought her. Her injured legs stretched out comfortably. "What are you drawing?" Alexander asked, settling beside her with his morning coffee. "It's you," Madison said, holding up a surprisingly detailed portrait. "But I made you smile bigger because that's how you look when you're not thinking about work stuff." Alexander studied the drawing, struck by how she'd captured something he hadn't even noticed about himself. "When did I become work stuff, Alexander, versus regular Alexander? When your phone rings and your face gets all scrunched up," Madison giggled. "Like this." She demonstrated an exaggerated frown that made Alexander laugh despite himself. "Madison," Alexander said carefully, "I've been thinking. You mentioned you don't have parents, but what about other family? Aunts, uncles, grandparents?" Madison's pencil stopped moving. "Why are you tired of me being here?" "Never," Alexander said quickly. "But sweetheart, somewhere out there might be people who love you and are worried sick. People who have the right to take care of you." Madison was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "There's Aunt Alina. She's my mom's sister. But when my parents died in the car crash 2 years ago, she was in nursing school and couldn't take me. That's how I ended up at St. Catherine's." Alexander's heart clenched. "Have you tried to contact her since you left?" "I'm scared," Madison admitted. "What if she doesn't want me anymore? What if she thinks I'm too broken now? What if her voice cracked? What if she makes me go back there?" "Oh, sweetheart." Alexander pulled her into a gentle hug. "Listen, to me, family doesn't work that way. Real family fights for each other, like you fought for me in the storm." Alexander's throat tightened. "Madison, I need to tell you something. That night, I found why I wasn't just some stranger who happened to be there. My company has been giving money to St. Catherine's. I didn't know what they were doing to you kids, but my money helped pay for it." Madison pulled back to look at his face. "You mean you're one of the bad guys?" "I don't know," Alexander said honestly. "I thought I was helping children, but maybe I was just being lazy, writing checks instead of paying attention to where the money went." Madison studied him with those two wise eyes. "Tio Alex," she said suddenly. "What?" "That's what I'm going to call you. Tio Alex. It means Uncle Alex in Spanish. My mom taught me some words before she died." Alexander felt tears prick his eyes. "I'd be honored to be your Tio, Alex." "Good," Madison said firmly, "because uncles protect their families, and you protected me." That afternoon, Alexander hired a private investigator to locate Alina Cooper. It took less than 6 hours to find her. She was working as a registered nurse at Seattle General Hospital and had been searching for Madison for months. She filed missing person reports, the investigator reported. Multiple calls to St. Catherine's. They kept telling her Madison had been placed with a specialized family and wouldn't provide details. Alexander's hands shook as he dialed Elena's number. When a warm voice answered, he took a deep breath. "Ms. Cooper, this is Alexander Hayes. I believe I have someone here who's been looking for you." The silence on the other end stretched so long that Alexander wondered if the call had dropped. Then Alina Cooper whispered, "Madison, you found my Madison." "I'm here, Aunt Alina," Madison called out, grabbing the phone. "I'm okay. Tio Alex saved me." As Alexander listened to the tearful reunion conversation, he realized something profound had shifted inside him. For the first time in his adult life, protecting someone else mattered more than protecting his business empire. But Dr. Blackwood's threatening text still glowed on his phone screen, a reminder that their safety was far from guaranteed. The doorbell's sharp ring shattered the peaceful morning like glass. Alexander glanced at his security monitor and felt his blood freeze. A tall, gaunt man in an expensive suit stood at his door, flanked by 2 security guards. Dr. Richard Blackwood had found them. "Madison, go to my bedroom and lock the door," Alexander whispered urgently. "Is it him?" Madison's face went white with terror. "Just go now." Alexander straightened his shoulders and opened the door. Dr. Blackwood's cold smile sent chills down his spine. "Mr. Hayes, I believe you have something that belongs to me." "I don't believe we've been formally introduced," Alexander replied, keeping his voice steady. "Dr. Richard Blackwood, director of St. Catherine's Children's Home." Blackwood stepped forward uninvited. "I'm here to collect Madison Cooper, who was unlawfully removed from our facility." Madison wasn't removed. She escaped from what sounds like a house of horrors. Blackwood's laugh was sharp as winter wind. Mr. Hayes, I understand your charitable impulses, but Madison is a deeply troubled child who requires specialized medical care. She's been telling you stories, hasn't she? Fantasies about medical experiments. Those aren't fantasies, aren't they? Blackwood pulled out a leather folder. These are Madison's psychological evaluations. Severe trauma-induced delusions, pathological lying. Without proper medication, she becomes increasingly unstable. Alexander's hands clenched into fists. What kind of medication? Experimental treatments for post-traumatic stress in children. Cutting-edge research that your company has been generously funding. Blackwood's smile turned predatory. Of course, you knew that when you decided to interfere. I knew nothing about how that money was being used. Ignorance isn't a legal defense. Mr. Hayes, you've been harboring a ward of the state for 3 weeks. That constitutes kidnapping. Blackwood placed official-looking documents on Alexander's coffee table. These court orders give me immediate custody. You have exactly 72 hours to return Madison, or I'll have you arrested. Alexander's mind raced. Let me see those documents. The papers looked legitimate, signed by Judge Patricia Williams, notarized, official seals, but something felt wrong. The dates were recent, filed just yesterday. How convenient that you obtained emergency custody orders so quickly, Alexander said. When a child's well-being is at stake, the system moves efficiently. Blackwood glanced toward the bedroom door. Madison, sweetheart, it's time to come home. Dr. Peterson is waiting with your medicine. A small sob came from behind the bedroom door. She's terrified of you, Alexander said. What kind of doctor terrorizes children? The kind who saves their lives. Blackwood's facade of pleasantness finally cracked. Mr. Hayes, you're a businessman. Let me speak your language. Return Madison voluntarily, and this stays quiet. Fight me, and I'll destroy you. Your company's involvement in unauthorized medical testing will be front-page news. Your stock will crash. Your board will demand your resignation. Alexander felt the walls closing in. You're threatening me. I'm offering you a choice. 72 hours. Mr. Hayes, think carefully about what matters. More your misguided hero complex, or your empire. After Blackwood left, Alexander called his lawyer immediately. The documents are legitimate. James Morrison confirmed an hour later. Blackwood has temporary emergency custody based on Madison being an at-risk minor who requires specialized medical intervention. Legally, he can compel her return. There has to be something we can do. Not much, unless you can prove the medical treatments constitute abuse. But that would require evidence, witnesses, documentation. Do you have any of that? Alexander looked toward his bedroom, where Madison sat curled in the corner, shaking with fear. Not yet, he said grimly. But I'm going to find it. Alexander, be careful. If Blackwood can move this fast through the legal system, he has serious connections. You're not just fighting a corrupt doctor, you're fighting an entire network. As Alexander hung up, Madison emerged from the bedroom, her small face streaked with tears. Tio, Alex, are you going to send me back? Alexander knelt and took her hands in his. Never, I promise you, Madison. But we're going to need help. What kind of help? Alexander's jaw set with determination. The kind that fights monsters. Alexander's hands trembled as he dialed the number his lawyer had reluctantly provided. Jake Morrison, private investigator, former FBI, specialized in cases involving institutional corruption. If anyone could help them, it would be him. Morrison, investigations, a gravelly voice answered. Mr. Morrison, my name is Alexander Hayes. I need your help with a situation involving child abuse at an orphanage. 2 hours later, Morrison sat in Alexander's living room, a weathered man in his 50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Madison had insisted on staying for the meeting. Clutching a stuffed bear Alexander had bought her. Tell me everything, Morrison said, pulling out a worn notebook. Madison spoke first, her voice growing stronger as she detailed the weekly injections, the sick children who disappeared, the fear that permeated every corner of St. Catherine's. Morrison's expression grew darker with each revelation. You mentioned Hayes Pharmaceuticals funding, Morrison said to Alexander. What do you know about those arrangements? I thought it was legitimate pediatric research, Alexander admitted. Annual donations through our charitable foundation. My CFO, David Chen, handles all the details. I need to see those files. All of them. Alexander led Morrison to his home office, where they spent 3 hours combing through financial records. What they found made Alexander's stomach turn. Look at this. Morrison pointed to a series of transactions. Your company didn't just donate money. You've been paying for specific research protocols developed by something called the Meridian Institute. I've never heard of Meridian Institute. That's because it doesn't officially exist, Morrison said grimly. It's a shell company. But look at the bank routing numbers. They all trace back to accounts controlled by Dr. Richard Blackwood. Alexander stared at the evidence spread across his desk. He's been using my money to fund illegal experiments on children. It gets worse, Morrison continued. These invoices show payments for test subjects and clinical trials. Your CFO has been authorizing payments for human trafficking, disguised as medical research. Madison, who had been quietly listening, suddenly spoke up. Mr. Morrison, there were other kids who came and went. Kids who weren't orphans. What do you mean, sweetheart? Some kids had families, but they were told their children were in special schools or treatment centers. The kids would cry and say their parents didn't know where they really were. Morrison's face went pale. Madison, do you remember any names? Any details about these children? There was a boy named Marcus. He said his mum thought he was at a camp for kids with diabetes, but they were giving him different medicines that made him sick. Alexander felt the room spinning. Dear God, how many children are we talking about? Based on your financial records, Morrison calculated quickly. Your company has funded treatments for approximately 200 children over 3 years. The weight of that number hit Alexander like a physical blow. 200 children, 200 families who had no idea their children were being used as test subjects. Mr. Morrison, Madison said quietly, what happens if Dr. Blackwood takes me back tomorrow? Morrison looked at Alexander with grim determination. That's not going to happen, kid, but we need more evidence, and we need it fast. What kind of evidence? Alexander asked. Medical records, financial documentation, witness testimony. Blackwood's been careful, but no operation this big runs without leaving traces. Morrison stood up. I'm going to need access to your CFO. David's been avoiding my calls since yesterday, Alexander said. I think he knows something's wrong. Then we find him. Tonight. Morrison's expression hardened. Alexander, you need to understand, when we take this public, there's no going back. Your company will be investigated, your reputation destroyed, even if you're cleared of wrongdoing. Alexander looked at Madison, who was watching him with those eyes. In her gaze, he saw not just trust, but hope that for once, an adult would choose what was right over what was easy. My reputation was built on lies, Alexander said firmly. It's time to tear it down and build something real. Morrison nodded approvingly. Then let's go catch ourselves a monster. David Chen's Bellevue mansion sat dark against the midnight sky, but Alexander could see the faint glow of light from the home office window. His CFO was awake, probably shredding documents. Stay in the car, Alexander told Morrison as they pulled into the circular driveway. Like hell, this man's been covering up crimes against children. Alexander's finger hovered over the doorbell, but the door opened before he could press it. David Chen stood there in his silk pajamas, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. I've been expecting you, David said quietly. Have you? Alexander pushed past him into the marble foyer. Then you know why I'm here. David led them to his study, where boxes of files sat stacked beside an industrial shredder. Morrison immediately moved to examine the documents. How long have you known? David asked, pouring himself a scotch with shaking hands. About St. Catherine's. 3 days. About your betrayal. About an hour ago. Alexander's voice was ice cold. 200 children, David, 200. You think I wanted this? David's composure cracked. You think I planned to become part of something so monstrous? Then tell me how it happened. David collapsed into his leather chair. It started 5 years ago. Blackwood approached me at a medical research conference, said he had revolutionary treatments for traumatized children, kids who'd been abused, neglected, abandoned. He needed funding for clinical trials. So you used my company's charitable foundation. The early trials seemed legitimate, David continued. Real research, published papers, proper oversight. But gradually, Blackwood asked for more money, fewer questions. He said the breakthrough treatments required secrecy to protect intellectual property. Morrison looked up from the files. When did you realize children were being harmed? Last year, David whispered. I visited St. Catherine's unannounced. I saw kids who looked wrong, sick, scared. When I confronted Blackwood, He showed me photographs. What kind of photographs? Alexander demanded. David's hands trembled as he reached for another drink. Pictures of me signing approval documents. Pictures of me at the facility. Audio recordings of our conversations. He said if I tried to expose him, he'd frame me as the mastermind. You could have come to me, Alexander said. Could I? David looked up with haunted eyes. Alexander, you sign 100 documents a week without reading them. You trust your executives to handle details. Blackwood had evidence that you approved every payment, every research protocol. He could make it look like you were the one calling the shots. Morrison placed a thick file on the desk. This is a contract for enhanced pediatric research protocols. It has your signature. Alexander examined the document. His signature was genuine, but he had no memory of signing it. This was buried in a stack of routine approvals. David, you deliberately hid this from me. I was trying to protect you. David exploded. Blackwood said if I kept quiet and kept the money flowing, no one would get hurt. He promised the children were just getting advanced treatments. Children were disappearing, Morrison said flatly. Kids were getting sick. Some of them died. David's face went white. Died. Blackwood said they were transferred to better facilities, placed with families. You knew, Alexander said, his voice deadly quiet. Deep down, you knew, and you chose to look the other way. I chose to protect our company, to protect you. David stood up unsteadily. Do you have any idea what this will do to Hayes Pharmaceuticals? Will be destroyed. Thousands of employees will lose their jobs. Legitimate research will be defunded. Better than letting more children suffer, Alexander said. David stared at him as if seeing a stranger. You're really going to sacrifice everything for one little girl? I'm going to sacrifice everything for the truth. Morrison closed his notebook. David, you're going to testify against Blackwood. You're going to provide every document, every recording, every piece of evidence you have. And if I refuse, then you'll go to prison as his accomplice, Alexander said. Your choice. David looked round his luxurious study, the leather-bound books, the expensive artwork, the symbols of success built on the suffering of children. He has a backup plan, David said finally. If anyone tries to expose him, he'll disappear with all the evidence. And he'll take Madison with him. Alexander felt ice form in his veins. What kind of backup plan? Blackwood has connections with research facilities overseas, places where no one asks questions about where the test subjects come from. David met Alexander's eyes. If you push him too hard, Madison won't just go back to St. Catherine's. She vanished completely. The next morning brought an unwelcome visitor. Dr. Blackwood stood at Alexander's door again. But this time his cold smile had been replaced by something far more dangerous, calm confidence. Mr. Hayes, I trust you've had time to consider our conversation yesterday. Alexander blocked the doorway. Madison isn't going anywhere. I was afraid you'd say that. Blackwood pulled out a tablet, swiping to a video file. Perhaps this will change your mind. The screen showed grainy security footage of Alexander's CFO entering St. Catherine's, shaking hands with Blackwood, examining children like livestock. The timestamp showed dates going back 3 years. Interesting viewing, isn't it? Blackwood said, of course, this is just the beginning. I have hours of footage showing your company's deep involvement in our research programs. That's not the whole story, and you know it. Truth is subjective, Mr. Hayes. What matters is what people believe. Blackwood swiped to another file, financial records, showing millions in payments from Hayes Pharmaceuticals. To an outside observer, this looks like your company systematically funding illegal human experimentation. Alexander felt trapped, but he kept his voice steady. What do you want? I'm a reasonable man. I'm prepared to offer you a deal. Blackwood's voice took on a businessman's tone. You continue funding our research quietly, efficiently, without asking inconvenient questions. In return, I'll arrange for you to legally adopt Madison. You get to play the hero. She gets a loving home, and our important work continues. Important work? You're torturing children. I'm developing treatments that will save thousands of lives. Blackwood snapped. The children at St. Catherine's are contributing to medical breakthroughs that will benefit humanity for generations, by using them as lab rats, by using resources that would otherwise be wasted. Blackwood's mask of civility finally slipped. These are damaged children, Mr. Hayes, orphans, runaways, throwaways that society has already discarded. At least with us, their suffering serves a purpose. Alexander had to fight every instinct not to punch the man. And if I refuse your deal, then I'm afraid things become complicated. Blackwood pulled out his phone, showing Alexander a news article draft. Prominent CEO faces investigation for funding illegal medical experiments on children. Your picture is already selected for the front page. Alexander read the article with growing horror. Every detail was carefully crafted to make him look like the mastermind behind the operation. David Chen was portrayed as a whistleblower trying to expose his boss's crimes. This story publishes in exactly 1 week, Blackwood continued, unless, of course, we reach an understanding first. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a choice. Madison gets a good home with a man who clearly cares about her. Your company continues its philanthropic work. Everyone wins, except the other children you're experimenting on. Blackwood shrugged. Medical progress requires sacrifice. At least this way, the sacrifice serves humanity instead of filling graveyards. From behind Alexander came a small voice. Tio, Alex. Madison had emerged from the bedroom, her face pale but determined. I heard everything. Madison. Go back inside, Alexander said quickly. No. She walked to Alexander's side, taking his hand. Dr. Blackwood, I won't let you hurt Tio Alex because of me. Blackwood's cold smile returned. Ah, Madison. Still telling stories, I see. Mr. Hayes, you should know that Madison has been having severe psychological episodes, hallucinations, violent outbursts. Without proper medication, she's becoming increasingly unstable. That's a lie, Madison said firmly. Is it? Mr. Hayes, has Madison told you about the voices she hears? About the imaginary friends who tell her to hurt people? Alexander felt Madison's hand tighten in his eyes. The child looked up at him with steady, clear eyes, not the eyes of someone having psychological episodes. Madison, Alexander said gently, go to your room for a moment. Mr. Blackwood and I need to finish our conversation. After Madison left, Alexander turned back to Blackwood. 1 week, 7 days to make your decision. Continue funding our research, and adopt Madison legally, or watch your empire crumble while she disappears into a system where no one will believe her stories. Blackwood headed toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Mr. Hayes, I'd advise against contacting law enforcement. Some of my research partners include very influential people who prefer to keep our work confidential. After Blackwood left, Alexander sank onto his couch, his head in his hands. Madison emerged from her room and climbed up beside him. Tio, Alex, are you going to make the deal? Alexander looked at this brave little girl who had already survived so much. What do you think I should do? Madison was quiet for a long moment. I think sometimes you have to fight monsters, even when you're scared. Alexander's hands shook as he dialed the number Morrison had given him. Alina Cooper answered on the second ring, her voice breathless with hope and worry. Mr. Hayes, is Madison okay? I've been going crazy since you called yesterday. She's safe for now, but we need to meet. There's something you need to know about St. Catherine's, and we're going to need your help. 2 hours later, Elena Cooper sat in Alexander's living room, her nurse's uniform wrinkled from a double shift at Seattle General. She was a petite woman with Madison's same dark eyes, but where Madison's held premature wisdom, Elena's burned with fierce determination. Madison, mi amor, Elena whispered, pulling her niece into a fierce embrace. I've been looking for you everywhere. Aunt, Elena, they told you I was in a special family, didn't they? Madison asked, her voice muffled against Elena's shoulder. They said you were placed with people who could give you better care than I could provide. Elena's voice broke. I believed them. I thought you were safe and happy somewhere. Alexander exchanged glances with Morrison, who had arrived earlier with a thick folder of evidence. Elena, what Madison experienced at St. Catherine's wasn't care. It was systematic abuse, disguised as medical research. As they explained everything, the illegal experiments, the pharmaceutical company funding Blackwood's threats, Salona's face cycled through shock, rage, and finally, cold determination. Other families, Elena said suddenly. When I kept calling St. Catherine's, demanding to see Madison, I met other people in the waiting room, parents and relatives who were also being told their children were unavailable for visits. Morrison leaned forward. Do you remember any names? Maria Santos. Her grandson Tommy was supposedly in a special program for diabetic children. She hadn't seen him in 6 months. Elena's voice hardened. And there was an older man, Robert Kim. His granddaughter was allegedly receiving treatment for anxiety disorders. The boy, Tommy, Madison said suddenly. He was at St. Catherine's with me. He wasn't diabetic. They were giving him insulin shots that made him sick. Alexander felt his stomach drop. They were artificially creating medical conditions to justify the experiments. How many families are we talking about? Elena asked. Morrison consulted his notes. Based on the financial records, potentially dozens. Blackwood's been running multiple schemes: fake orphanages, fraudulent treatment centers, bogus special schools. We need to find these families, Alexander said. If we can get them to testify, it won't be enough. Morrison interrupted. Blackwood has legal documentation for everything. Forged consent forms, falsified medical records, bogus court orders. Unless we can prove the documents are fraudulent, it's our word against his. Elena stood up abruptly. Then we get inside St. Catherine's and find the real evidence. Absolutely not, Alexander said. It's too dangerous. I'm a nurse, Elena replied firmly. I know what to look for in medical records, what questions to ask, and I have legitimate reason to be there. I'm Madison's legal guardian once I petitioned the court. Aunt Elena, Madison said quietly. Dr. Blackwood keeps the important files in his office safe. I saw him putting things in there after kids got really sick. Morrison shook his head. Breaking into a safe is a felony. Even if we found evidence, it wouldn't be admissible in court. Then we don't break in, Elena said. We get invited in. Alexander looked at her questioningly. Elena's expression grew calculating. I'm going to call St. Catherine's tomorrow. I'm going to tell them I want to donate nursing services to their facility. Volunteer work to help underprivileged children. Elena's voice grew stronger. Healthcare facilities always need volunteers, especially registered nurses willing to work for free. Elena, if Blackwood recognizes you, he won't. I've never met him, and my last name is different from Madison's. Cooper was my maiden name. I took my husband's name when I married. My legal name is Elena Rodriguez. Madison looked up at her aunt with new admiration. You're going to be a spy. I'm going to be an avenging angel, Elena corrected. Mr. Hayes, how much time did Blackwood give you to make your decision? 6 days, Elena nodded grimly. Then we have 6 days to gather enough evidence to bury him. Morrison, I'll need copies of those financial records and any medical terminology that might be relevant. Elena, Alexander said softly. If this goes wrong, if Blackwood realizes what you're doing, then he'll discover that a pediatric nurse who's been searching for her missing niece is someone you really don't want to mess with. As Elena held Madison close, Alexander realized that for the first time since this nightmare began, he felt something he hadn't dared hope for, the possibility that they might actually win. But in the back of his mind, Blackwood's words echoed ominously. Some of my research partners include very influential people. Elena's hands were steady as she pinned the volunteer badge to her scrubs, but Alexander could see the tension in her shoulders as she prepared to enter the lion's den. They sat in Morrison's surveillance van outside St. Catherine's, watching the grey brick building that had been Madison's prison. Remember, Morrison spoke into his earpiece, you're Elena Rodriguez, pediatric nurse from General Hospital. You're there to assess their volunteer nursing program, and if I see Blackwood, professional interest only. You're evaluating their medical protocols for potential collaboration. Madison squeezed Alexander's hand from the back seat. Aunt Elena, Tommy's room was on the second floor, third door on the right. That's where they kept the sick kids. Elena nodded, checking the tiny camera disguised as a pen in her uniform pocket. I'll find him, me, more. Through their earpieces they listened as Elena entered the facility. Her voice came through clearly as she spoke to the receptionist. Good morning. I'm Elena Rodriguez from Seattle General. I called yesterday about your volunteer nursing program. Oh yes, Ms. Rodriguez, Dr. Patterson is expecting you. He's our medical director. Dr. Blackwood is in meetings all morning. Alexander felt a surge of relief. At least Elena wouldn't encounter Blackwood immediately. 20 minutes later, Elena's whispered voice came through their earpieces. I'm in the medical wing. There are at least 15 children here, all showing signs of medication side effects. Nausea, tremors, skin discoloration. Morrison was recording everything. Can you identify specific symptoms? Neurological tremors consistent with experimental psychotropic drugs. Several children have 4 ports that look permanent. For regular infusions, Elena's voice grew strained. There's a little boy here who matches Madison's description of Tommy. He's severely malnourished and keeps asking for his grandmother. Alexander felt Madison tense beside him. That's him. That's Tommy. Alina continued her devastating report. Medical charts show daily injections of compounds I don't recognize. The dosages are marked as Protocol 7 and Protocol 12. No, standard drug names. Can you photograph the charts? Morrison asked. Dr. Patterson is giving me a full tour. He's actually proud of their innovative treatment approaches. He doesn't realize I'm documenting everything. For the next hour, Alina moved through St. Catherine's like an angel of vengeance, disguised as a volunteer. She photographed medical records, documented injection schedules, and identified children from Morrison's missing persons database. I'm outside Blackwood's office now, Alina whispered. Dr. Patterson went to get coffee. The door is open. Alina, be careful. Alexander warned. There are files everywhere. Patient folders marked with numbers instead of names. Wait, her voice caught. There's a shipping manifest on his desk. Transport to Meridian Research Facility, Prague. Dated for next week. Madison gasped. Prague. That's where they said the really sick kids went. Elena's voice became urgent. The manifest lists 20 children by number, including number 247. Madison, what was your patient number? 247. Madison whispered, her face going pale. Alexander felt his blood turn to ice. Alina, get out of there now. Wait, there's more. Financial records showing payments from Lena's voice cut off abruptly. Through the earpiece came the sound of footsteps and a familiar, cold voice. Ms. Rodriguez, I presume. Or should I say Ms. Cooper? Alexander grabbed Morrison's arm. He knows. Blackwood knows who she is. Quite a performance. Blackwood's voice continued. Though I must say, volunteering at the same facility where your missing niece was supposedly placed shows remarkable dedication. Elena's voice was steady despite the danger. I don't know what you're talking about, please. Elena Maria Cooper, age 32, graduated from University of Washington nursing program 2 years ago. Currently employed at Seattle General Pediatric Intensive Care, searching for her niece Madison Cooper since she disappeared from our facility a month ago. You can't prove anything, Alina said. Can't I? There was the sound of papers rustling. This is fascinating reading. Miss Cooper, it seems your niece has been telling quite dramatic stories about medical experiments. Tragic, really, how trauma can distort a child's perception of necessary medical care. Morrison was already starting. The van's engine were going in. No, Alexander said firmly. If we storm in there, Alina becomes a hostage, and we lose all our evidence. Through the earpiece, Blackwood continued. I'm curious, Miss Cooper, did Madison happen to mention where she's currently staying? I have legal custody, after all. She mentioned staying with a kind man who found her during the storm. Alina said carefully. Mr. Alexander Hayes, perhaps wealthy pharmaceutical executive with a savior complex. Alexander's heart hammered as he listened to Alina navigate the verbal minefield. I wouldn't know, Alina replied. I'm just here about the nursing volunteer program. Of course you are. Well, since you're so interested in our medical protocols, perhaps you'd like to see our research in action. We have several subjects scheduled for Protocol 15 trials this afternoon. That won't be necessary, I insist. After all, you've come so far to learn about our work. The sound of a door closing came through the earpiece, followed by a muffled voice. Help me. Morrison was already driving toward the building. Alexander, call the police. Now. But as Alexander reached for his phone, it buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Hayes, your timeline just accelerated. You have 2 hours to bring Madison to St. Catherine's, or Ms. Cooper disappears permanently. No police, no FBI, no tricks, just you, the girl, and a simple exchange. Alexander stared at the text message, his hands shaking with rage and terror. 2 hours. Blackwood had Alina, and now he was demanding Madison in exchange. We call the FBI, Morrison said firmly, pulling over 2 blocks from St. Catherine's. This is kidnapping, extortion, and how long will it take them to get here? To set up surveillance, plan a rescue. Alexander's voice was strained. Alina could be dead by then. Madison leaned forward from the back seat. Tio, Alex, Dr. Blackwood won't kill Aunt Alina. Not yet. What do you mean, sweetheart? He needs her. She's a real nurse, someone who can watch the kids during the transport to Prague. He's been looking for medical staff who won't ask questions. Madison's voice was surprisingly calm. He'll keep her alive until the transport leaves next week. Morrison looked at Madison with new respect. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about how to stop him. Madison's eyes held a determination that reminded Alexander of Alina. And I have an idea. Alexander felt his protective instincts flare. Absolutely not. Whatever you're thinking, listen to me, Madison interrupted. Dr. Blackwood wants me back because I know where he keeps the real evidence. The files that prove everything, the real names of kids, which companies are paying him, where the children are being sent. Madison, you're 9 years old. I'm not putting you in danger. I'm already in danger, Madison said simply. But this time, I won't be going in alone and scared. This time, I'll have backup. Morrison was studying his tablet, reviewing the buildings. What exactly are you proposing? Madison pulled out the notebook where she'd been sketching. The pages showed detailed drawings of St. Catherine's layout, room numbers, camera locations, guard positions. I've been drawing everything I remember, Madison explained. The safe in Dr. Blackwood's office is hidden behind a painting of some old saint. The combination is his birthday. I saw him enter it once, when I was supposed to be sleeping. Alexander examined the drawings with growing amazement. Madison had documented the entire facility with the precision of a trained observer. You know, his birthday, Morrison asked. October 13th, 1972. He's vain about his age, always complains about being only 52 when other doctors don't take him seriously. Morrison checked his phone. Alexander, my FBI contact just texted. They can't move without a federal warrant, which will take at least 6 hours to obtain. Alexander felt the walls closing in. So our choices are surrender, Madison, or let Alina die. No, Madison said firmly. Our choice is to be smarter than Dr. Blackwood. She opened her notebook to a page showing the building's fire alarm system. Every Tuesday at 2 p.m., they test the fire alarms. All the staff has to evacuate the medical wing and gather in the main courtyard. It takes exactly 12 minutes. Tomorrow is Tuesday, Morrison realized, and Dr. Blackwood always checks his safe during the alarm test because he's paranoid about the building's security during evacuations. Madison continued. If I go in there voluntarily, acting like I'm surrendering, I can get to his office during the alarm test. Alexander shook his head. Madison, even if you got into the safe, how would you get out? Madison smiled for the first time in days. Because you'll be there to help me. She turned to a schematic showing the building's delivery entrance. Food deliveries come in through the basement every Tuesday morning. Morrison can get you inside with a fake delivery truck. During the fire alarm, everyone will be outside except security and they'll be watching the perimeter, not the interior. Morrison was studying the plan with professional interest. It's actually not bad. High risk, but potentially workable. It's insane, Alexander said. We're talking about sending a child into a building full of people who want to hurt her. They're not going to hurt me right away, Madison said pragmatically. Dr. Blackwood needs me calm and cooperative for his plan to work. He'll try to convince me that Aunt Elena is safe, that I should just go along quietly. Alexander looked at this remarkable child who had survived horrors that would break most adults. Madison, what if something goes wrong? Then at least we tried, Madison said simply. Tio, Alex, those other kids, Tommy, Sarah, all of them, they're counting on us. And Aunt Elena risked everything to help them. Morrison's phone buzzed with another message. He read it and his face went grim. Blackwood just sent another text. Elena has 1 hour to volunteer as medical staff for the Prague transport, or she become part of the next experimental protocol. Alexander felt his resolve crystallizing. What do you need me to do? Madison took his hand. I need you to trust me. And I need you to promise that whatever happens, you'll make sure those files get to the FBI. Madison, promise me. Chew. Alex. Alexander looked into those brave, determined eyes and made a promise that terrified him. I promise. But as they began finalizing their desperate plan, none of them noticed the black sedan that had been following Morrison's van since they left St. Catherine's. The delivery truck rumbled through Seattle's early morning traffic. Morrison behind the wheel, dressed as a maintenance worker, Alexander hidden among supply boxes in the back. His heart hammered as they approached St. Catherine's loading dock. Madison should be arriving at the front entrance in exactly 30 minutes. Morrison's voice crackled through Alexander's earpiece. The fire alarm test is scheduled for 2 p.m. That gives us 4 hours to get into position. Through a crack in the truck's rear door, Alexander watched the imposing brick facade. of St. Catherine's grow larger. Somewhere inside that building, Alina was being held captive, and in 30 minutes, Madison would walk voluntarily into the same trap. I still think this is insane, Alexander whispered into his microphone. Sometimes insane is the only option. Left, Morrison replied. Loading dock security just waved us through. You're clear to move in 60 seconds. Alexander's phone buzzed with a text from Madison. Just arrived. Dr. Blackwood is actually smiling. This is either going to work perfectly or go very wrong very fast. The truck stopped. Morrison opened the rear door and Alexander slipped out, carrying a toolkit and wearing maintenance coveralls. The basement delivery area was exactly as Madison had described, dimly lit, with service corridors leading throughout the building. Service elevator to the second floor. Morrison's voice guided him. Madison's drawings show Blackwood's office is third door on the left from the main corridor. Alexander made his way through the maze of institutional hallways, his maintenance disguise allowing him to pass unnoticed. Through windows, he could see Madison in the main visiting room, sitting across from Dr. Blackwood. Even from a distance, Alexander could see the calculated charm in Blackwood's posture as he spoke to the child. I can see Madison, Alexander whispered. She looks calm. Kid's got nerves of steel, Morrison replied. Alina is being held in the medical wing, third floor. I've got eyes on 2 guards. Alexander reached the second floor and found Blackwood's office. The door was locked, but Morrison had provided him with basic lockpicking tools. Within minutes, he was inside. The office was exactly as Madison had described: expensive furniture, medical certificates on the walls, and a large painting of St. Catherine herself hanging behind the desk. Alexander approached the painting, looking for hidden hinges. Found the safe, he whispered. October 13th, 1972. His hands shook as he entered the combination. October 13th, 72. The safe clicked open, revealing stacks of files, USB drives, and what appeared to be research protocols. Jesus, Alexander breathed as he photographed the documents. Medical records for hundreds of children. Bank transfers from pharmaceutical companies I've never heard of. Transportation manifests to facilities in Prague, Mumbai, Lagos. How much time before the alarm test? Morrison asked. Alexander checked his watch. 20 minutes. But Morrison, these files. This operation is massive. International. We're not just dealing with one corrupt doctor. This is a global network. Through his earpiece came Madison's voice, transmitted from her hidden microphone. Dr. Blackwood, where is my Aunt Elena? You promised I could see her if I came back. Blackwood's smooth voice responded. Alina is perfectly safe, my dear. She's simply helping us prepare for your new placement. You're going to love Prague. Wonderful medical facilities, very advanced treatments. Alexander felt his blood freeze. Prague. They were planning to ship Madison overseas within days. I need to see her, Madison insisted with the perfect tone of a frightened child. I won't go anywhere until I know she's okay. Very well, Blackwood sighed, but only for a moment. We have a schedule to maintain. Alexander heard footsteps in the corridor outside Blackwood's office. He quickly stuffed more files into his jacket and closed the safe, but the painting wouldn't quite align properly. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Alexander dove behind the desk just as the door opened. Through the gap beneath the desk, he could see expensive leather shoes, Blackwood's shoes. Interesting. Blackwood's voice was thoughtful. I was certain I'd locked this door. Alexander held his breath as Blackwood moved around the office. The man was checking things, looking for signs of disturbance. Sir, a guard's voice came from the doorway. The girl is asking to see her aunt again. She's becoming agitated. Bring them both to the medical wing, Blackwood ordered. It's time. Madison understood exactly what her future holds. After they left, Alexander emerged from hiding. His phone showed a text from Morrison. Something's wrong. They're moving Alina and Madison to the third floor together. This wasn't part of the plan. Alexander's earpiece crackled with Morrison's urgent voice. Alexander, get out of there now. I just saw 3 black SUVs pull up to the main entrance. This is about to become a much bigger problem. Through the office window, Alexander could see men in dark suits surrounding the building. These weren't local security, they looked federal. But before Alexander could move, his earpiece filled with the sound of Madison's terrified scream, followed by Elena's voice. Don't touch her, she's just a child. Then Blackwood's voice, cold and final. I'm afraid there's been a change of plans. It seems Mr. Hayes has been more resourceful than I anticipated. Madison, say goodbye to your uncle. You won't be seeing him again." Alexander's blood turned to ice as Madison's scream echoed through his earpiece. Abandoning all caution, he raced toward the stairwell, taking steps 3 at a time to reach the 3rd-floor medical wing. "Morrison, where are you?" Alexander gasped into his microphone. Those weren't just any federal agents. Morrison's voice was grim. "FBI's here, but they brought backup. Blackwood's been under federal investigation for months." Alexander burst through the medical wing doors and froze. The hallway was filled with children, pale, frightened kids in hospital gowns being led by FBI agents toward the exits. At the far end, he could see Blackwood backing toward a rear stairwell, one arm round Madison's throat, the other holding Alina at gunpoint. "Let them go, Blackwood," Alexander shouted. "Mr. Hayes," Blackwood called back, his composure finally cracking. "How thoughtful of you to join us, though I'm afraid this facility is now permanently closed." "The FBI has everything," Alexander said, moving slowly down the hallway. "Your files, your bank records, Morrison's evidence. It's over. Perhaps, but Madison and I have an appointment in Prague that simply cannot be missed." Blackwood pressed the gun harder against Elena's temple. "She knows too much about our international partners, powerful people who don't appreciate witnesses." Madison looked directly at Alexander, her young face showing remarkable calm. "Tio, Alex, I got the files. They're in Dr. Blackwood's safe." "Clever girl," Blackwood snarled. "Unfortunately, cleverness can be a fatal flaw." What happened next occurred in seconds but felt like hours. Alina suddenly dropped to the floor, yanking Madison down with her. Alexander lunged forward, just as Blackwood fired. The bullet grazed Alexander's shoulder, spinning him sideways. But his momentum carried him into Blackwood. They crashed into the stairwell wall. Blackwood's gun clattered away as Alexander, despite his wounded shoulder, pinned the man against the concrete. "You destroyed children's lives for money," Alexander snarled, his vision blurring from pain and rage. "I save lives," Blackwood spat back. "Those children are contributing to medical breakthroughs. Those children are human beings, not lab rats." FBI agents poured into the stairwell, separating them. As they handcuffed Blackwood, the man looked directly at Madison. "This isn't over, little girl. My partners won't forget what you've cost them." Agent Sarah Chen, the lead investigator, knelt beside Madison. "You're safe now, sweetheart. Dr. Blackwood won't hurt anyone ever again." "What about the other kids?" Madison asked. "Tommy, Sarah, all the ones who got sent away." Agent Chen's expression softened. "We're tracking down every child in our files. Tommy's grandmother has been notified. She'll be here within the hour." As paramedics treated Alexander's shoulder wound, Madison sat beside him, holding his uninjured hand. "Tio, Alex, are you going to be okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. You were incredibly brave." Alina joined them, tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe this is really over." Agent Chen approached with a thick folder. "Mr. Hayes, thanks to your evidence and Madison's information, we've identified facilities in 6 countries. This network has been operating for over a decade." "How many children?" Alexander asked quietly. "We're still counting, but Madison's files show at least 300 kids who've been trafficked through this system." Agent Chun's voice hardened. Blackwood was just middle management. The real money came from pharmaceutical companies willing to pay for unregulated human testing. Alexander felt sick, including mine. "Your company was manipulated, Mr. Hayes. You're a victim here, not a perpetrator." Agent Chen paused. "Though you'll need to testify about your CFO's involvement." As they prepared to leave St. Catherine's forever, Madison tugged on Alexander's sleeve. "What happens now?" Alexander looked at Alina, who nodded with understanding. "Now, we go home," Alexander said simply. "All of us. Together." 6 months later, Alexander sat in a federal courthouse, watching Dr. Richard Blackwood receive his sentence. Life in prison without parole for human trafficking, child endangerment, and racketeering. The judge's words echoed through the packed courtroom. "Dr. Blackwood, your crimes against innocent children represent the darkest abuse of medical authority this court has ever witnessed." Madison squeezed Alexander's hand as they listened. She looked healthier now. Her cheeks had color, her smile came easier, and the haunted look had faded from her eyes. Alina sat on her other side, officially Madison's legal guardian, but practically part of an unconventional family unit. Tommy's grandmother wants to thank you again, Alina whispered to Madison. He's doing so much better. The prosecution had built an ironclad case. David Chen's testimony exposed the financial network. Morrison's investigation provided crucial evidence. And Madison's brave testimony helped convict not just Blackwood, but 7 co-conspirators across 3 countries. Alexander's company survived, though barely. The board had initially demanded his resignation. But when the full scope of his efforts to expose the crimes became public, shareholders rallied behind him. Hayes Pharmaceuticals was restructured with new oversight and transparency measures. Mr. Hayes, a reporter caught him outside the courthouse. How does it feel to see justice served? Alexander looked down at Madison, who was helping Alina distribute informational flyers about a new foundation they'd started. Justice isn't just about punishment, Alexander replied. It's about making sure this never happens again. That evening, in Alexander's penthouse, Madison worked on her latest drawing while Alina prepared dinner. Physical therapy had helped. Madison's leg healed properly. She still walked with a slight limp, but her doctors said she'd live without pain. What are you drawing tonight? Alexander asked, settling beside her on the couch. Madison held up her sketch. 3 figures standing together in front of a building with a sign, reading Cooper Hayes Foundation for Missing Children. It's our new family, Madison said simply. The one we chose. Alina joined them, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. The foundation received another call today. A family in Portland whose daughter disappeared from a treatment center. Alexander nodded. We'll help them find her. Madison looked up from her drawing. T.O. Alex, do you think the bad people are really gone? The ones who hurt you are gone, Alexander assured her. But there might be others out there. That's why we keep fighting. Madison nodded seriously, then smiled. Good thing we're pretty good at fighting monsters. 2 years later, Madison Cooper Hayes celebrated her 11th birthday in the courtyard of the Cooper Hayes Foundation headquarters. The building that once housed a neglected community center now buzzed with activity. Social workers, volunteers, and families reunited with their missing children. Madison walked with confidence now, her walking cane more habit than necessity. The little girl who had once cowered in storms now stood before news cameras, advocating for missing children with the poise of someone far beyond her years. Families aren't just about blood, Madison told the gathered crowd of supporters and donors. Sometimes they're about people who choose to fight for each other when everything seems impossible. Alexander watched from the audience, his heart swelling with pride. Alina stood beside him, wearing her foundation coordinator badge, left nursing to run their reunification program full-time. In 2 years, we've helped reunite 87 children with their families, Madison continued. But we're not stopping there. Every child deserves to be safe, loved, and believed when they tell their story. After the ceremony, the 3 of them sat in Alexander's office, reviewing case files. Tommy Santos, now 9 and healthy, had drawn pictures for Madison, stick figures of their hero family, helping other kids. The Peterson case in Denver, Alina said, spreading photos across the desk. Another fake research facility. This time they're calling it behavioral modification therapy. Madison studied the files with the analytical mind that had helped expose Blackwood's network. Same pattern. Vulnerable kids, promises of treatment, families kept away. Alexander made notes in the margin. We'll need Morrison's team for surveillance, and I'll contact Agent Chen about federal jurisdiction. Are you scared? Alina asked Madison gently. These cases get harder each time. Madison considered the question seriously. I'm scared for the kids who are still trapped. But I'm not scared of the work. We know how to do this now. As evening fell, they walked home together through Seattle's downtown. A pharmaceutical executive who'd lost his empire to save his soul, a nurse who'd found her calling in seeking justice, and a remarkable girl who'd survived the unthinkable, and chose to help others do the same. T.O. Alex, Madison said as they approached their building. Do you ever miss your old life? Before everything changed. Alexander looked at his chosen family, imperfect, unconventional, but bound by something stronger than blood. Madison, my old life was just existence. This is living. That night, Madison added the final touches to her newest drawing. 3 figures, standing guard over a group of children, with the caption, "Heroes aren't born, they're made by choosing to protect others." Sometimes the greatest families are forged not in comfort, but in the crucible of doing what's right when everything else seems wrong. The end.